In today's episode of the Pathway Presents podcast, I'm meeting with Patrick Renvoise, and he is the Chief Neuromarketing Officer, and that is important for today's conversation, of SalesBrain. And they, basically bring to the table a unique and award-winning persuasion model called NeuroMapR. It's essentially, neuromarketing's, how can I say, the pioneers of neuromarketing, who we're going to be talking to today. So I'm very, very curious to learn from Patrick about this approach and how this is, enriching growth and sales teams, around the US and the globe. So Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yes, good afternoon, Lucas.
Very good. So maybe give us, that brief overview about SalesBrain. What is it all about?
Well, 20 years ago, I was living in Silicon Valley. I still live there. And I had been selling very complicated and very expensive stuff. My expertise is called the complex sales, and I sold supercomputers for a living. And I realized that there are two different kinds of people in sales. They are the one that can explain complex, complicated value proposition in a few simple words. And those are the ones that are successful. And then the rest of the people are struggling because they have a great personality, yet they cannot sell repetitively, they cannot sell predictably. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm more of a scientist by background. I studied computer science, I've got a master's in it. And I've always had a passion for teaching, but I was always puzzled by the fact that people tell you that sales and marketing are more of an art than a science. And for a scientist, that is not acceptable, right? So I decided to write a book. So I actually quit my job at the time. I was, a high-paid executive in Silicon Valley. And I wanted to write a book. And as you may know, there are 20,000 books that have been written on sales and marketing. And most of them present a long list of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And those lists are pretty good. Most of them are pretty good. After you've read about a few, hundreds of those books, you're not going to learn anything, but they give good tips. But tips are not acceptable for a scientist. So my quest for a holy grail was to come up with a scientific model of how people use their brain to make buying decisions. And amazingly enough, I didn't find the answers in sales and marketing books. I found the answers in neuroscience books. In other words, today there are two worlds, right? There is the world of sales and marketing, and there is the world of neuroscience. And neuroscientists have a fairly good understanding of how Homo sapiens uses its brain to make decisions. But that information has never made it to the world of sales and marketing. And I discovered the work of a researcher by the name of Daniel Kahneman. So Lucas, have you heard of Kahneman?
Kahneman, yeah, for sure. It's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes, Think Fast and Slow. So Kahneman, who was a professor of psychology at Princeton, wrote a book in 2000, and he actually received the Nobel Prize in Economy in 2002. And Kahneman talks about two systems in the brain. He named them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the fast brain. System 2 is the slow brain. Now, we didn't want to call it System 1 and System 2, so we called it the primal brain, System 1, and the rational brain, System 2. And Kahneman demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that System 1 wins even today. In other words, that Homo sapiens is not a rational species. Homo sapiens based all its decisions, all its behavior on how we react from our primal brain. And this is the brain that we share with reptile. This is the brain that deals with fear. This is the brain of the unconscious. Right? So for the last 20 years of my life, my objective has been to take this research, these findings, and translate that into a very simple model that anybody in sales and marketing should use. Now, I don't know if you had a chance to read Kahneman's book, but I've done a survey, and I've trained over 200,000 people, and including 20,000 CEOs. So I've trained a lot of people on this. And I always ask people, so who's read the book from Kahneman? So a lot of people raise their hand. And then my next question is, how many of you finished the book? And it's typically less than 20%. Why? Because this is PhD plus level reading. In other words, if you don't have a PhD in evolutionary biology, or if you don't have a PhD in neuropsychology, the book of Kahneman is very hard to digest. So, right? And what we've done is we've made it simple. We've translated all that into a one-page picture. So, this is actually the cover of our book, right? I'm waving it in front of the camera right now. But we've made the complex simple for business people to apply. And our promise is that if you follow the process that we suggest, if you answer the 4 key questions, that are key to making people react and decide, then you are maximizing your probability to sell. So we talk about the science of persuasion, we talk about the probability of persuasion, we talk about system 1 and system 2, then we have a process of persuasion, and in fine, we have the chemistry of persuasion. Right? So this is a science. We never tell people trust us. We say, here is what researchers says, here is the guy who said it, and here is what that means for you in sales and marketing.
What would you say is sort of, since, the idea of persuasion is only sort of like touching, obviously, on marketing and sales, like what is sort of like some fundamentals that sales and marketing is just getting very wrong about actual persuasion?
Whoa, so that's a $10 million question, right? And I like to talk about a language of persuasion, right? There is a language of persuasion. A lot of people learn that language empirically. All the people that are successful, they speak that language. So if you talk about the Bill Gates of the world, the Steve Jobs of the world, they were using that language intuitively, right? They just didn't know it. But by decoding that language, what we can do now is we can teach other people to be almost as successful as those people are. So what are some of the things? So we've translated, so I'm going to skip all the neuroscience part, but here is the deal, right? That primal brain, the brain that drives our behavior, our subconscious brain, can only be triggered on one of 6 stimuli. Those 1 of 6 stimuli are very simple. The first one is it's got to be personal. In other words, if you try to convince somebody, your message has to be about them, not about you, because the primal brain is personal and it's all about my own survival. In other words, there is no compassion at the level of the primal brain. It's all about me, me, me. So the first stimulus is personal. Second stimulus is contrastable. In other words, that primal brain does not understand the stimulus from its own intensity, but it refers to it as to the relative importance of that stimulus. Right? Let me give you an example. If you hear a loud noise over a loud background, you're not going to react so much, right? But if you hear the same loud noise over a completely quiet background, it's going to make you jump, right? So it's the relative value of a stimulus which is important, not its absolute value. Right? So the primal brain only understands things in relation to a certain threshold, contrastable. The third stimulus is tangible. Tangible, what does that mean? It means the primal brain does not understand complex, abstract concepts. In fact, if you think of it, language was invented about 10,000 years ago for written language. Spoken language has been around for anywhere from 50 to 70,000 years ago, right? But the primal brain, our primal brain is 500 million years old. So it's not even the same scale. So evolution didn't have enough time to make an impact on the primal brain in terms of language. So your primal brain does not understand language because words are not tangible enough, right? So what does that mean? It means the primal brain does not understand things like we are one of the leading provider of integrated scalable modular architecture that will give the end user blah, 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 blah. Primal brain does not understand that. The primal brain understands yellow banana. Why? Because the yellow banana is something tangible. You can eat it. It's good for your survival, right? So the primal brain does not understand intangible concept or complex concept, including words, right? The fourth stimuli is memorable. What does that mean? It means that if I tell you something right now, it's not important, because what's important is what you will remember at the moment you will have to make a decision. Right? So remember that most likely your customer is not deciding right away. It depends. I mean, if you're on a website, yes, the customer might decide to take the next click right now. But if your sales process your sales cycle is a lot longer, most likely your customer will decide not at the moment you're talking to them. So at any moment of time when you're communicating with your customer, it is not what you tell them right now, which is important. It's what will they remember at the moment they will make that decision. Right? So your stimulus has to be memorable. You know, if I tell you something right now, but you completely forget about it when you're going to make the decision in 2 seconds, 2 minutes, 2 months, or 2 years from now, then that does not work, right? So your stimulus have to be optimized to be memorized by that primal brain. The fifth stimulus is visual. So as I said earlier on, right, the primal brain does not understand words, but the primal brain understands images. Now, it's kind of hard for people to understand that because they believe that reading is a visual activity. Why? Because the first step in the process of reading is extracting the shape of the letters, and that's a visual task. But in reality, reading is a 3-step process, and only the first step is visual. The next 2 steps involve different areas of your brain. Most of them are in the auditory cortex. So reading is more, you're using more of your ears than your eyes when you're actually reading something, okay? So now the primal brain loves the visual stimulus. There are many explanations for that. So first of all, the optic nerve, if you look at the brain here, the optic nerve connects directly into the primal brain. And that nerve is 50 times faster. It actually conveys 50 times more information. The bandwidth is 50 times greater than the nerve from the ear to the brain. Right? So fundamentally, your primal brain loves images, but does not understand words. And this is something, again, that popular wisdom has told us. You know, in the US, we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, in my book, it's even more than that. You know, a picture is worth infinite number of words, visual. And the last stimulus is emotional. In other words, if you and I discuss something which is only purely rational, so for example, if I say, hey, Lucas, why don't you do 3 times multiplied by 7, 3 times 7, right? Then your primal brain will not be engaged in that task because it's a very highly cognitive, you know, highly complex cognitive task, and you will be only able to engage your neocortex to do that. So the emotional stimulus is also something that people in advertising, they understand, right? They understand that, well, it's mostly about creating emotional moments. In fact, one of the greatest experts on the role of emotion in the brain is another researcher by the name of Antonio Damasio. And I'm going to quote Damasio, right? So here is what he said. He said, we, meaning Homo sapiens, we are not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that think once in a while. Right? So it's not like emotions is optional. No, emotion is the basic fuel that is needed by the brain to make decisions. Because there is no such thing as a rational decision. It does not exist. In fact, if you don't trust me, you know, I would understand that. But you can read the book from Damasio. One of his books is called Descartes' Error. And in Descartes' Error, he gives us a lot of explanation of how he tested that hypothesis that we are not thinking machines that feel. It's all about emotion. We are feeling machines that think. So this is a feeling, this is a machine that processes emotions or feelings, right? So here's what happened. Here's what happened is first we make emotional decisions and then we rationalize them, not vice versa. So it's hard for a lot of people to believe that, right? So if I had a bit more time, I could give you some of the experiment that Damasio did to prove that, right? But here is the bottom line. The bottom line is that primal brain can only be triggered by personal, tangible, contrastable, memorable, visual, and emotional stimuli. So this is all over the medical literature. This is what neuroscientists have spent their life demonstrating, right? And this is the first part, usually when we work with a company, right? We teach them that because it seems to be so unusual, so irrational that it's that way, right? That people don't understand it. And then once we have done that, then we jump into the world of sales and marketing, and we translate that into 4 steps, the 4 key steps of persuasion.
Mm-hmm. So what do like sales and marketing teams typically need to do in order to be able to transfer these concepts into their practices?
All right, so they need to answer those 4 questions. And again, I could talk about those 4 questions for 3 days or 3 months, right? I'm going to try to talk about them in 3 minutes. The first step, it's the idea of diagnosing the pain. So let me tell you what the 4 steps are. First step is diagnose the pain, then differentiate your claims, demonstrate the gain, and finally deliver to the primal brain. So our 4 steps, I'm going to repeat those words because they are very important. Pain, claim, gain, and primal brain. So why do you need to diagnose the pain? What does it mean? And by the way, this is the promise of neuromarketing. Why? Because what is neuromarketing? Why do we use it? So you have to understand that marketing has been traditionally working that way. But there is a fundamental flaw with the marketing approach, which is that, guess what? People don't know what they want. No, if you force people to self-report using words what they want, you're going to get a distorted image of the reality. Let me give you a proof, right? If you ask people, do you like vanilla or chocolate? People will tell you, oh, I really like chocolate. And then you take them to a store and you say, hey, let's buy an ice cream right now. And they buy the vanilla. Doesn't make sense, right? So the promise of neuromarketing is we're not going to trust so much their answers, but we will measure directly on their bodies various physiological changes, right? So in other words, I'm going to put electrodes on your head and I'm going to measure your EEG, right? And then as you give me the answer, should I trust what the EEG is telling me or should I trust your words? Well, as you know, it's a lot easier to lie with your words than it is to lie with your brainwaves, right? So EEG is one of the modalities, and there are several modalities. Another modality is called facial imaging. In other words, I'm going to extract from the way you contract the 43 muscles on your face what the emotion that you're experiencing. So for example, if you tell me, oh, I don't really like vanilla, right? But when you say that, if you have a smile on your face, most likely, again, I should trust the muscle on your face versus the words that you're using. Then we use skin conductance. In other words, we measure how electricity flows between your fingers. Why? Because, for example, when people lie, they get more nervous. When they get more nervous, they accelerate the heart rate, they accelerate the heartbeat, and they microperspire. And that microperspiration can be measured because it changes the resistance of your skin, right? We measure pupil dilation. We also can track where your eyes are going in an image, right? So we use all these modalities. Then we enter that into our big soup machine, which is, you know, what we do and the experience that we have after doing it for 20 years. And then we extract what you really think, right? Or what you really want, or what we call the pains. Mm-hmm. So we help people diagnose the pain at more of an unconscious level versus the consciousness level. So that's the first step. The second step is, and by the way, you need to do that. Why do you need to diagnose the pain? Because the primal brain of your customers is very selfish. It's very personal. It's only about them, not about you. But even when you're talking about them, you know, to really understand the difference between what people want, what people need, and what people's pains are, it is critical. In other words, the pain is an unconscious process. It's a negative emotion. It's very close to a fear, right? People often mistake pains for fear, but it's the same idea. And when you understand your customers at that level, then you're going to be able to build a pyramid of your sales and marketing strategy, which will be anchored in what drives their behavior, right? So that's the first step, diagnose the pain. The second step is now you need to differentiate your claims. Why? Because the primal brain is sensitive to contrastable information. It needs to be contrasted. And the problem is that today, most companies have competitors, and the competitors are saying the same thing. You know what they're saying? We are one of the leading provider of. So look at your website, and if your website starts with, we are one of the leading provider of, by definition, you're not triggering the primal brain of your audience, because that is what your competitors, what all your competitors are saying. So you've got to be able to say, we are the only provider of, or the first, or the best, or the fastest, or whatever. You need to qualify that with something that make you stand out of the lot, right? So that you're not just a red apple among red apples. You're a green apple among red apples. So that's the second step, differentiate your claims. Sometimes people call it the unique selling proposition. But for us, claims means something even more than your USP. It means we teach people how to write a book. And that book is titled, Why Should You Buy From Us? Why? Because most companies write a book, but you know what the book is titled? The book that most companies write is who we are and what we do. The problem of who we are and what we do, nobody cares, because by definition, the primal brain of your audience is all about me, right? Yeah. So we teach people how to translate their book, which is titled Who We Are and What We Do, into the why buy from us, right? And now somewhere in the book, you will be able to talk about who you are and what you do. But the who you are and what you do is going to serve the why buy from us. Right? Mm-hmm. And in that book, we tell people you cannot have more than 3 chapters. Now, if I had more time again, I could show you that your brain is wired to remember concepts by groups of 3. See, we talk about ABC, red, yellow, green, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and blah, blah, blah. The brain is wired to remember things in groups of 3. So we tell you, you need to write your book under 3 chapters. And the title of those chapters are going to be your claims. And of course, your claims need to be differentiated from your competitors. They need to be therapeutic to the pain that you have decided you will be able to solve, and they need to be provable, right? So that's the second chapter. The third chapter is then once you've done that, you need to demonstrate the gain. Why? Because it's not enough to say, oh, if you buy from us, you will save $1 million next year. Well, how do you prove it? Are you giving me a proof that is tangible enough? So because the primal brain loves tangible, how can you simplify your value proposition so that you can demonstrate the gain? And now remember that the primal brain is the intelligence of a 3 to 4-year-old child. So can you make your value proposition understandable by a 3 to 4-year-old child, regardless of what it is you're selling, right? And again, I mean, I've helped people sell satellites, telecommunication systems, supercomputers, particle accelerators. Those are really complicated machines with a really complicated value proposition, right? And inevitably, every time we won the deal, is because we made the work to make our value proposition understood by a 3-year-old. And that's what we mean by demonstrate the gain. That's what makes it tangible. And we show people that there are 3 different kinds of values and 4 different kinds of proof. So your value prop always falls into 3 categories. It can be either financial, it can be strategic for your business, or it can be personal for all of the decision influencers, right? So we always try to maximize the financial, the strategic, and the personal value of your value proposition. And then there are 4 ways you can prove it. Best proof of gain is a customer case, because when you use a customer case, you use a third party, right? Then the second proof is a demo, as in using logic to demonstrate logically what you say. Third kind of proof is data, as in statistical marketing data. And the last kind of proof, which sadly is what most people use, is when you have a vision. And it's when you tell your customer, trust me, Mr. Customer, I will save you $1 million next year. Truth is, I have no proof, but I'm going to tell you a story, an analogy, or a metaphor to help you believe in the vision that I have of how I'm going to save you $1 million. Right? So that's demonstrate the gain. And then the last step is, by the way, once you have answered the question, what's the pain that you solve? What's your unique selling proposition? What's your claims? And what your customers will gain? When you answer those 3 questions, pain, claim, gain, it helps define the what you should say. That's going to be the content of your message. Right? And the last step, the deliver to the primal brain, is the how you should deliver it. And of course, it's all about building a story. But the science of building a story is half of our book. And it would take me 3 hours to tell you how this works, right? But it's the whole idea of how do you tell a story? And the story always starts by, once upon a time, there was a poor client like you who was in tremendous pain, right? You know, they had a problem in their life. They have a thorn in their foot, but it's not a thorn in their foot. They had a tree in their eye, right? They had a big problem and their life was miserable. And so that's the problem. And the problem is most companies, they start with the solution. No, you don't want to start with the solution. You start with the problem, right? And then you make the story even more exciting by saying, oh, wow, guess what? We had tried all these ways to eliminate the thorn in our foot, but we were still, itching. We were still in so much pain. And then finally one day, I discovered this company who had this unique stuff, and we were able to make $10 million. We were able to get married, and I was the happiest guy on the planet. Right? But you don't start by, if you buy with us, you will save $1 million. You start by telling the story, and there is a progression. And we have, what I believe is the only scientific model that shows how to build a story. So this is what we call the chemistry of persuasion. And some of the elements are pain, claim, gain, but some of the other elements go beyond pain, claim, gain. I mean, it's, again, you're asking me to tell you the secret in 5 minutes when it took me 20 years to come with it. Right?
No, it's probably just all about, getting that pointer and then starting to explore deeper, and even sort of like structuring that information that giving over to listeners now, so that they can, put their teeth into that. I would be curious, right? To do a slight shift, like in terms of, the company SalesBrain, like, how do you guys win clients? Like what is the channels, what is the path that you guys leverage in order to educate people about this approach?
Sure. So, first of all, we've been in business for 20 years. A big part of our business is public speaking. So we give a lot of public talks. We have written 2 books. They've been translated into 14 or 15 languages now. We have a website which is very well recognized. If you Google our name, if you Google the word neuromarketing, we are one of the first ones to pop up. So we generate our own leads that way. Now we are at the stage though, where we have launched a certification program. In other words, we didn't want to keep the golden goose just for ourselves. So we are teaching other people how to raise a golden goose. And amazingly enough, that program before COVID, we had to meet face to face with those people, and those people are typically very well educated, masters and PhDs. But now we've been able, because for the last year we've been, like everybody else, we've been working remotely, but we've been able to create a remote program to train people on this, and we've also transformed all our services into a remote program. And by the way, amazingly enough, I have a LinkedIn course, so people can see us also on LinkedIn. The course can be free if you have LinkedIn Premium, by the way. But over Christmas, LinkedIn called me and said, Patrick, we love your stuff. Visibly, a lot of people love your stuff because you already have like 60,000 viewers. But why don't you develop a special course for us? And we're going to call that special course this. We're going to title it, Why People Hate Zoom and How Neuroscience Can Help. So we understand the science of what happens when you're talking to people remotely. And the medium itself changes the way you should think of selling. And so I've passed pretty much the last 12 months, when we were confined, to develop this course, etc. And it's going to be released this summer.
Awesome. I think a lot of people are actually going to be looking forward to a topic like this because everybody's bound to sell through Zoom these days. So
yeah, and a lot of people again are starting to tell you, oh, let me give you some tips of what you should do on Zoom, right? So they tell you need to clean up the background, you need to have good camera, you need to have good lighting, etc. But they cannot explain it scientifically, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going to explain to people what you need to change and how you need to change it, and we're going to put that in the concept of the brain because it's all about the primal brain. So your primal brain right now, when we're having this live conversation 10,000 miles apart, right, it has to follow certain rules because of your ancestral brain.
Very, very interesting. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I want to ask you just one last question, and that would be, if today would be your very first day, you're starting to work at SalesBrain, right, going all the way back, like what's the one advice that you would give yourself?
What the one advice that I would give myself?
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting one, because I along the way I had to make a lot of decisions, right? Like for example, very early on when I started to do consulting, I said, we want to be a unique consultant. We want to make everything scientific. In fact, my partner, will help me finish the very first book that we did. He has a PhD on the subject, right? So we wanted to have a very strong scientific background because we never want to tell people trust us, because nobody wants to trust you, right? So it's all about. So this is the suggestion that I would make to every entrepreneur, right? Find a way. I mean, people are trying to raise money. And when they're trying to raise money, they always get very excited about, I have a new product, and it's going to kill the world, and it's going to be the best thing after sliced bread. Well, how can you prove it, right? In other words, do not ask people for an act of faith in anything you say, in anything you do. Really come up with strong proofs and make those proofs as scientific as you can. And that's the secret, right? Because I believe that there is an ultimate truth. I believe that it's all about finding a rational way of applying a model. In other words, if I had been, my real passion would be quantum mechanics, right? Quantum physics, because what is matter? What is non-matter? What is consciousness? This is the last barrier. In fact, my TED Talk is a call for people to apply that knowledge that we have about the primal brain and apply it to other areas, because what we preach, I've applied it to sales and marketing, but you can apply it to education. Because if you're a father or a mother, how do you teach your kid to do the right thing? And how do you use proofs that they should follow your advice? If you're a judge, how do you render justice in a 100% scientific way? And judges think they make rational decisions, but they don't, right? Because they use their primal brain to judge. And if you're a policeman, how do you do policing, understanding your own primal brain and the primal brain of the people you're trying to stop from doing something crazy? And so I would invite people to really learn about their own primal brain, because it will help them protect themselves against people that are trying to influence them or to persuade them in a non-ethical way, right? And I would encourage them to understand about their own primal brain, because they're going to learn a lot of interesting things.
Right. Super, super interesting stuff that we went through here today for this episode. There's a lot more that one can, bite their teeth in. Like, Patrick, maybe tell us, like, if somebody's interested, if somebody's enticed, if somebody wants to, bring that type of knowledge into their sales process, what's the one thing, the one next step that they can do?
So if they have 2 minutes, they can visit our website at salesbrain.com. If they have 17 minutes, they can watch my TED Talk. You can just Google my name on YouTube. If they have 48 minutes, they can look at my LinkedIn profile and find my LinkedIn course. It's called The Neuroscience of Sales. If they have 6 hours, they can buy our book. The book is titled The Persuasion Code, right? Mm-hmm. If they have 3 days, then they can call me and we'll see if we can help them.
Very cool. Thanks a lot for being part of Pathman Presents today.
Thank you.